Well, welcome officially to the Cresa Hybrid Workforce webinar, How to Affirm and Operationalize Your Hybrid Workforce Strategy. My name is Jason Jones. I'm joined by Paul Springer and Steve Ike, my colleagues. Again, officially, welcome to the webinar. So there is a workforce trend that's happening right now that's both frightening, but also exciting. Frightening because it can cause real disruption for any organization, but exciting because of its implications for the health of the broader economy. And exciting because of the possibilities that it offers for organizations who really go on the offensive to take advantage of this trend and capitalize on it. And this exciting trend, I'm going to let the headlines do the talking, as this recent headline from a Forbes article describes: workers are quitting their jobs in record numbers as the U.S. experiences a booming job market. More headlines in the Wall Street Journal: forget going back to the office, people are just quitting instead. Bloomberg Wealth: employees are quitting instead of giving up work from home. From Fortune magazine: job hopping heats up. 65% of U.S. workers are looking for a new job. And finally, from the New York Times: how do they say economic recovery? I quit. Quoting from the article: with new opportunities and a different perspective as the pandemic eases, workers are choosing to leave their jobs in record numbers. And here's the proof. This is a chart from the U.S. Labor Department. This shows the number of U.S. workers leaving their job as a percentage of the total number of jobs in the economy. And this ratio is called the quits rate. And quits are voluntary separations from jobs. It's a good barometer of the worker confidence in their ability to get another job. So a few key numbers from this, just for context. The low point on this graph is September of 2009. This is just coming out of the Great Recession, when hardly anyone was voluntarily leaving their job, and the quits rate was at a low of 1.2%. Then the economy began to improve, and slowly the number of people leaving their jobs voluntarily, quitting, increased. But then the pandemic hit, and the quits rate plummeted to 1.5% in April of 2020. However, coming out of the pandemic 1 year later, in April of 2021, the quits rate skyrocketed a whopping 80% to 2.8%. This is the highest level since 2000, at least. That's as far back as the numbers go. Now, in May, it decreased to 2.5%, still well above any time in the past 20 years. But then in June, it jumped back up to 2.7% and stayed there for July. But then it jumped back up again, most recently to 2.9% in August. That's the numbers that we have the most recent information for, the month that we have the most recent information for. Once again, breaking the old record set back in April. This is being called the Great Resignation. So what can be done about it? Well, what are organizations doing to recruit and retain talent in the midst of this war for talent? Some are offering raises and bonuses. Some are extending perks, such as free Pelotons and Apple products. Others are taking the time to design engaging office environments. And a good example of this is Google. Google is building and repurposing office spaces to make them more inviting, more attracting, using ideas like cool outdoor hangouts with teepees for team meetings. They're trying to make the office a place where their employees want to go and candidly are willing to make the commute. And finally, many forward-thinking companies are planning flexible, hybrid workforce strategies that leverage both what they learned about remote work over the past year and combine that with the time-proven benefits of a shared office. Ford Motor Company is a good example. Ford has announced a progressive hybrid work model for 30,000 of its office-based employees who can, quote, continue to work from home indefinitely and have flexible hours approved by their managers. You have to remember, That's coming from a 100-year-old manufacturer in the staid auto industry. And I think this quote by Kirsten Robinson of Ford is both insightful and humble. She says, if there's one thing that we've learned over the last 12 months, it's that a lot of our assumptions around work and what employees need has shifted. And I would add, we've certainly experienced a lot of learning around what employees want and what they're willing to do. So the questions that most organizations are asking is, if a hybrid workforce strategy can help recruit and retain the best and the brightest, then what should be the balance for my organization between remote and office? In other words, what's the right hybrid blend? And then once we've decided on that right blend, how do we put it into practice fairly, equitably, and without opening ourselves up to any blind spots that we didn't think of in advance? Clearly, you need a plan. You need a plan to affirm and then operationalize your workforce strategy. But every plan is going to be unique to every organization and likely unique to each department within each organization, potentially each employee. Many businesses feel like the person on the screen. There are just so many paths to choose from, so many variables to consider, both known and unknown. Many organizations feel stuck and they're struggling to build consensus on a path forward. So, if you're interested in answering questions like, well, what is the right blend for our organization? And what are the criteria for a successful hybrid workforce strategy? What is the roadmap to navigate to the right blend of remote work and office? And then finally, how do we operationalize our strategy and put it into action? Then this is the webinar for you. As mentioned, I'm Jason Jones. I'm a managing principal with Cresa, and I'm joined today by Steve Ike and Paul Springer. I've been at Cresa for 18 years, originally as a real estate advisor, but now exclusively leading two of our service lines, Cresa Business Technology Sourcing and Hybrid Workforce Services. Steve has over 25 years of experience providing workforce strategy expertise to companies like General Electric, Macy's, Procter & Gamble, and Kimberly-Clark, just to name a few. And Paul has over 25 years of experience working with global nonprofit organizations and for-profit organizations, integrating human resources, operations, IT, and real estate. Today we'll have a 50-minute presentation with some Q&A at the end. We'll record the webinar and send a copy out afterwards. Please ask questions via the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. If you just hover over the icon down there, the Ring Central icon, you'll see pop up the Q&A feature. And don't wait until the end. As you see things that are of interest to you, questions that you have or a comment that you want to make, perhaps from your own experience, please go ahead and put that in there, and we will get to it at the end of the webinar during the Q&A period. So, number one, today we're going to address context for where we are in the timeline of the COVID-19 experience from a work perspective. Two, we're going to discuss the benefits and challenges of a hybrid workforce strategy. Three, we'll discuss its key elements. And four, we're going to talk about and show to you a roadmap to both affirm and operationalize your hybrid workforce strategy. And we hope that you can take things from this webinar and use them with your own organization. So we start with the context for the timeline of the pandemic. Phase one was the immediate phase. Overnight, people were forced to work from home. Phase two is the endure phase. We continue to endure, leveraging technology, modifying workflows, and maintaining our culture. Phase three will be the post-COVID sustain and compete phase. Organizations will strive to sustain a new way of working that leverages what they learned about remote work while also recapturing all of the benefits of a shared central office. But to get from phase two to phase three, you have to go through a transition. And that is where we are right now. But before leaders can move forward with a specific transition plan, they've got to ask a key question to get things started. And this is a question that addresses the powerful workforce desire, the internal innate human desire for freedom to choose where and when you go to work. And this key question is one that we suggest you too ask yourself. And that question is, what is the right hybrid workforce strategy specific to us that will, number one, be reflective of our culture and minimize expenses and the threat to business continuity, while at the same time maximizing productivity, talent attraction and retention, and financial results. So it's these key business drivers that inform our planning process for a hybrid strategy and its implementation. But in order to evaluate different strategies, we've got to start by understanding the benefits and the challenges of those strategies. So let's take a look. The benefits of a hybrid workforce strategy combine the best of remote work and the best of the shared office. But I want to pause just for one moment to make a quick point about bias. Bias can blind you to the opportunities presented by different points of view. It may seem elementary to review the benefits and challenges of remote versus office because most of these we already know. However, it's important when you begin your planning process to collectively agree as a team to have a conversation about what the benefits are of both options and, of course, what the cons, the pros and the cons. So to foster objectivity and ensure your organization remains open-minded, start your planning process with a dialogue about the benefits and challenges of both. Now, at the top of the list for benefits for remote working is a reduced commute and fewer interruptions. These, of course, increase productivity. Other potential benefits are the reduced expense of real estate, less employee turnover, lower absenteeism, and the personal costs of a reduced commute, reduced spending on clothes and food. There are environmental benefits, and employees consistently state that their work-life balance is better. Now, on the other hand, the benefits of the office are time-proven, and they've really crystallized during the pandemic. Highlights on the screen include things that typically occur best in person, such as mentoring and serendipitous moments. One benefit of both remote work and the shared office is the ability, to recruit and retain talent. So this is something that can only be achieved when you have both places, because most employees really want to experience both. They want a hybrid. So if you don't offer both remote and the shared office, you're going to limit the pool of potential employees from which you can recruit. However, with all the benefits of a hybrid workforce environment, there's several challenges to plan for. And we're going to highlight 3 scenarios that organizations could be faced with in a post-COVID hybrid workforce environment. The first challenge is the potential for disparity between teams. Let's take Team A. Team A has a manager who embraces a hybrid workforce. She's on board with the concept of giving you freedom to choose where and when you feel you can be the most productive. Periodically, she requires in-person meetings, but they're purposeful and well-run. She focuses on the output of your efforts, not the input of your time or presence in the office. Team members feel a strong spirit of freedom working for her. And then there's Team B. Team B has a manager who doubts the long-term effectiveness of a hybrid workforce. He's uncomfortable managing people that he cannot see and requires in-office presence, although he does allow remote work 1 day of the week. When Team B looks at Team A, they feel constrained. So what's the outcome? Team B may feel jealous, dispirited, and they wonder, can I switch teams? Or worse, should I leave my job? Another challenge is internal division within a hybrid team. In this scenario, we have in-office team members who are either full-time or majority in office, and then we have remote team members who are either full-time or majority remote. So if the boss spends most of her time in the office, then in-office team members have proximity to her that remote members do not. And this proximity may lead to real or perceived better career opportunities, choice assignments, promotions, etc., and better access to information, potentially. What is the upshot of this scenario? Remote team members feel undervalued and dispirited. Teamwork is reduced. And they may wonder, can I switch teams? Or worse, should I leave this organization? If you're the VP overseeing this team or these teams, what do? How do you prevent this scenario? And a final challenge of a hybrid workforce regards how to accommodate multiple employee profiles. And by profiles, we mean how and when an employee chooses to work. For example, profile number 1 are employees who choose to work 3 days in the office and 2 days at home, or perhaps the other way around. Profile number 2 are in the office 100% of the time, but there's a cultural acceptance that if they take an afternoon or a day to work remotely, no big deal. And then profile number 3's default location is at home, but they attend periodic in-person team meetings and occasionally choose to drop in the office to work or to socialize. The challenge is, how do you accommodate all of these profiles? What are the critical requirements of your organization to ensure that each of them is supported in their work? Now, this next slide is really key to awareness of what it takes to support a hybrid workforce. What should organizations do from the perspective of human resource policy, measuring performance, ongoing training, cultural norms, technology, cybersecurity, and developing the right real estate strategy that will support each of these profiles at the same time? Should you even allow all of these profiles? Is it any surprise why many organizations feel stuck in their planning right now? So those were 3 challenging scenarios, but here are some of the top challenges that result from those scenarios. You'll see the list developing on the screen. These looming issues showcase the need for organizations to invest time right now, preparing for the future, building consensus, casting a vision to employees, and ultimately creating a strategy that not only addresses these challenges, but also, and this is the real sweet spot, this is the money, but also leverages the benefits of hybrid working, of both remote and office, to maximize productivity, recruiting and retaining talent, and financial results. So, Cresa has developed a conceptual framework, actually multiple, and practical roadmaps to tie all of the components of hybrid working together into a cohesive strategy, and then help operationalize that strategy. The first key framework is a concept that we call be sequential to be successful. And this gets you headed down the right path, and it all starts at the top. We believe that the 2 most important elements of success are leadership and culture. They are the umbrella which overhangs all success in all business operations. Then, the fundamental business goals of operational productivity, recruiting and retaining talent, and maximizing financial results informs all decisions and drives behavior. But to support these business goals, you must follow a sequential path, starting with workforce strategy, followed by workplace strategy and design, and then real estate strategy. Too often companies skip the human component of the workforce strategy and they go straight to step 2 or step 3, and that's a mistake. So here it is again. Step 1, drive step 2, which leads naturally to step 3, be sequential to be successful. And when workforce strategy is addressed first, it gives you and your organization the freedom to design your workplace and your real estate strategy with the confidence that you're basing the design and the strategy on meaningful information. You want to build the workplace design and real estate strategy on solid rock, not shifting sand. So with that in mind, we're going to focus on 5 steps to affirm and operationalize your workforce strategy. And the process is best thought about in 2 phases. Phase 1 is to determine and affirm the strategy. And phase 2 is to operationalize the strategy. Step one, determine and affirm. That's easy to say, but it's much harder to actually do. Even those of you who have already determined your strategy may feel compelled to reassess key building blocks of your strategy in light of what you learned today. Now, at a high level, you'll need to decide whether the strategy is fully remote, fully office, or some type of hybrid blend of the two, which is the most likely for most organizations today. But at this step, you'll also decide whether this is an organization-wide mandate, sort of one size fits all, or will it be left to the discretion of departmental and team leaders to make these decisions? In fact, that's a question. Who is making the decision? And at what level are you extending the authority to make that decision? Now, once those decisions have been made, you can move on to phase two, to operationalize your strategy. But this first step is actually quite complex. So we're going to walk you through a roadmap for making this decision in a manner that contemplates and aligns all of the key departments of your organization. And those key departments are listed here. You've got human resources, information technology, finance, etc. Each of them will make unique contributions to the collective success of the strategy. So in order to implement a sustainable hybrid strategy, you've got to ensure that each of these departments are aligned with the others to create that integrated organizational structure. And part of your due diligence is to uncover what the gaps are in each department. And of course, well, how can we fill those gaps? And by the way, that's what top talent is looking for. When they are considering joining your organization or contemplating whether they should stay in your organization, remember the great resignation that's going on, they want to know, number one, what's our strategy and its guidelines, but number two, they also want assurance that the organizational infrastructure, right, the IT, the human resource policies, the operational workflows, et cetera, all of these things are in place that support the strategy and their own success, no matter where they work. So this slide now shows the critical requirements of each of these departments necessary to support the hybrid workforce strategy. And this is the checklist that every organization should work through when affirming their hybrid workforce strategy. At Cresa, we help our clients evaluate all of these requirements in a thoughtful, methodical manner, and we believe that's a key differentiator for our firm. We don't know of anyone else who starts the real estate strategy, which is what we're known for, by evaluating the upstream critical requirements of the workforce strategy, the human component, which downstream, it's the humans who are actually occupying the space. Let's not forget that. The space is for them, not the other way around. So we'll send an email out with this list to all attendees, so no need to jot down every bullet point right now. But we're going to go through a few some details of a few of these departments during this webinar. But if you want more information or a deeper conversation, please reach out to us. Our contact information will be up at the end of the webinar, and you can always reach out to the Cresa advisor who invited you to the webinar, and they can connect us as appropriate. So to go into a little bit more detail of the human resource critical requirements, I want to reintroduce my colleague, Paul Springer. Paul is our human resource and operations subject matter expert. He has over 25 years of experience integrating HR, operations, IT, and real estate. So Paul, I turn it over to you.
Great, thank you, Jason. So as Jason shared, one of the most important departments in the hybrid workforce strategy is human resources. And the critical requirements for HR to effectively support hybrid work really start with job roles. And as we all know, interestingly, although many organizations went to 100% remote during the pandemic, that doesn't necessarily mean that all roles moving forward are suitable for full-time work from home or remote work. Many roles can be done remotely, but the better question is, should they be done remotely? In order to achieve the highest productivity, you really need to determine if a role has dependencies or requires in-person collaboration or requires the use of resources in the office. Additionally, related to personal aptitude, even if roles are suitable for remote work, The job processes need to have a clear alignment with hybrid workforce strategies, and this could mean things like automation of paper-based processes or digitizing of files, reviewing of systems, or maybe understanding of how to best collaborate, whether that's in the office or using technology. And this leads to training for managers and employees. Managers may benefit from training to better manage a dispersed team that includes both people working remote or at home or in the office at the same time at any given point. In addition, the technology that enables remote work is constantly changing, and many employees don't even know the full suite of technology available to them. Many organizations have found implementation of collaboration and document management tools imperative to the success of their work in this new environment. Another key component to the strategy is ensuring transparent and equitable criteria and eligibility guidelines. I can't stress that enough. This should be memorialized and communicated clearly to increase transparency within the organization and with a real focus on communications. Lastly, a key component to this strategy is the employee handbook. Many businesses only focus on the hybrid policies or the strategies around that, but really, when you're working with a dispersed team, the entire employee handbook requires a detailed review and an update to ensure that policies are written to align with a dispersed team that could be both a remote or in-office audience. In addition, we recommend the use of an intranet or other automated communication platform to enable employees to easily access and clearly understand the employee handbook, no matter where they are, no matter where their work location. And speaking of hybrid workforce policies, these policies really should address some key components, and we have them listed here on the screen: eligibility requirements, tools and resources the company will provide for home use, and also around expectations, what the employee is expected to provide, and then, so what the employer is expected to provide also. We're talking about things like basic standards for internet, a clean and quiet place to work, and then there's expectations for personal performance and participation and productivity. And then lastly, what constitutes disqualification? So, those are really areas that really need to be focused on as you're looking at these policies. And as it relates to clear policies, it's crucial to set expectations. And as a leader, if you don't set expectations, your employees will set their own, and they're likely going to be different from yours. For a deeper dive into the technology components, I want to reintroduce my colleague, Steve Ike. Steve has over 25 years of experience providing workforce strategy consulting to several large, successful global businesses. And Steve, I turn it over to you.
Oh, thank you so much. And as we kind of set the baseline in technology and how it helps and enables remote work, it's really more than platforms and tools. Technology is a resource enabler that can be leveraged to create that connected and collaborative enterprise. As we look at how, when, and where people work, whether remote, in the office, or a combination, communication and collaboration platforms are that foundation for purposeful interaction. Through real-time and near real-time, communications platforms can be used for anytime, anywhere, one number reach access across multiple devices. And when combined with a shared workplace, it allows us to meet, collaborate, and share ideas. And performance management focuses on what Jason mentioned earlier, managing productivity versus activity. And it aids in really 3 areas for a hybrid strategy: building trust, empowering employees, and driving results. And it addresses that if I can't see, I can't manage, and evolves to if I can measure, I can manage. And performance management is both a process and a set of tools that organizations use to measure and evaluate corporate performance and employee performance. It helps managers have those meaningful conversations with employees and provides real-time access to information in a visual dashboard. And importantly, it helps address that issue faced with the in-office versus remote tension, providing that consistent and measurable productivity, progress towards goals, and it drives those business outcomes. And now as we look at document management, we've used tools and storage and libraries like Dropbox and Google Drive and Microsoft SharePoint But when we combine that with a management tool that can be utilized to manage content, address security, who's the owner of that document, what is the version, and how do we provide for easy distribution and access of those documents and files? It facilitates real-time and anytime access, addressing process, workflows, and document control. And we think about areas of loan processing in a financial services institution or claims management for an insurance provider. But with any organization, it addresses those financial, HR, marketing, and operations records for that general business. And finally, cybersecurity and compliance. These are often the most overlooked and underanalyzed areas for remote work. With more people at home, with more connected devices, it really provides that chance or opportunities for unauthorized folks to gain access to critical and secure information. There are technical considerations like segmenting a wireless network for business use, secure connectivity, and intrusion detection. There are human factors that need to be addressed. And this addresses threats from within and external, both intentional and accidental. And finally, we look at the physical and logistical areas of your remote access. And when we think about working from home, we know that folks have or may have an office, but also in a residential environment where multiple people are working from home at the same time, there may be shared spaces that people work. So we think about, can you lock your door with your information? Can you secure your laptop? And the considerations that if you're working with secure information, no eyes to see and ears to hear what you're working on. And finally, as we look into how to make this more employee focused and responsibility brought to that employees, we want to make sure that we have training for those employees as well as a documented IT and security policy to address a bring your own device with tablets and cell phones, with mobile devices that are accessing information. And this is where we can address phishing attacks or intrusion detection and wireless connectivity, and think about how many devices at home that you got connected to your wireless environment. Those devices can be an access point for external users. So we need to really think through not only our policy and our compliance, but how do we manage through that? So Jason, thank you for the time to share a little bit about information technology, and I'm sure we'll address some that come up at the end.
Absolutely. There's just so much to think about when it comes to these human resources and information technology issues. So thank you for going through that, both of you. And so a good question is, well, what does this do downstream to the corporate real estate? And this is the last key component that we'll talk about today, is the real estate itself, the office space that supports the people. And this is the physical space. But the concept of office space, I think this is important to note, it's really changed because of the pandemic. And to accommodate employees' desire for freedom of choice in where and when they work, organizations now really have to change their view of the office and office space. And it's shifting now to more of a network of flexible, convenient, and on-demand places, whether it's your home, whether it's the office, or other coffee shops, third-party co-working spaces, etc. Employees want the option to choose the workplace location where they feel they're going to be most productive that day, or even just part of the day. They might switch between multiple places, which really means freedom of movement. And that's what the arrows on the screen are intended to communicate. It's freedom of movement, whether between workplaces or even inside of a workplace. Now, at the same time, in order to really make this effective, and this is a sort of a key concept and a phrase that we have coined, leaders must be purposeful about their frequency and the medium of collaboration, whether that's a virtual or in person. So this concept is purposeful collaboration. Team leaders must be intentional about when to use the medium of digital tools, such as video conferences and collaboration software like Slack, Microsoft Teams, etc., versus when to use the medium of the physical office for collaboration. They must be intentional about how they use these tools, ensuring that people who are working remotely on any given day are actively included in in-person meetings and not at a disadvantage to people who are physically present in the office. That's going to create some long-term significant issues inside organizations if leaders are not cognizant of this and working to make everyone feel included, important, and really tap into the benefits of each of what everyone has to offer. So leaders are going to need to model the behavior that they want to see from their employees, and they're going to have to make efforts to be organized, to be prepared, and to be intentional about how to make the best use of everyone's time, how to be equitable and inclusive, and how to build this culture of purposeful collaboration. So to make it easy to visualize the steps to affirm and operationalize your strategy, we developed a roadmap to guide you through both phases of the process. And this is a core part of the workforce strategy consulting that we do. And it all starts with phase 1, which is step 1, affirm the strategy. And this is to clearly state whether your organization is fully office, fully remote, or what the degree is of a hybrid blend. And there's different terms that are starting to evolve and come out, like remote first or office first or remote centric or whatever the case may be. You've got to communicate that, and you want to state whether or not this is an organization-wide mandate, meaning one size fits all, everybody must step in line, or to what degree this decision is going to be delegated to departmental and team leaders, sort of down the chain of command. And perhaps it changes from week to week, quarter to quarter, etc. So we always begin with our process with a vision and goals session where you're going to build your team, establish goals, and set a timeline. Next, you're going to go through the process of discovery. We recommend you do this. This is the consulting we offer, but you should do this on your own. And this is when you'll conduct interviews, do surveys, and focus sessions to really gather information about all the critical requirements that we mentioned earlier for each company department. Then, step 1C is to analyze, develop strategy, ensure that there's departmental alignment, and determine the appropriate solutions. And this phase of affirming your strategy ends with the internal affirmation. That's that internally public casting of the vision as to what is your policy, what is the strategy. Now, phase 2 is the subject of the rest of the webinar. It encompasses steps 2 through 5 to operationalize the strategy that you've chosen. So let's talk about criteria and guidelines. And by criteria and guidelines, we specifically mean where people will be working, whether in the office versus working remotely. And examples include, I mentioned some of this previously, remote-centric, office-centric, X number of days of the week in the office, or perhaps X% of the time in the office, which provides a little bit more flexibility. There may be variations for specific employees based on their job or travel requirements, as opposed to a blanket policy. These are all things that you've got to decide and build consensus among your top leadership so that it flows down through the organization. Now, we also recommend that you consider categorizing each employee to help communicate your plan throughout the workforce with transparency and equity. Next, step 3, you'll need to memorialize the plan. This not only means putting the plan in writing, but also documenting specific human resource policies that are associated with your strategy. You're going to need to update job descriptions and employee work agreements, contracts. And of course, you'll need to create dynamic schedules, things that can be flexible and change depending on how the schedules change, that detail where and when employees are working so people know when to find others physically. Now, you can always find someone when you are using Microsoft Teams with the concept of presence, where they're, if you're familiar with Teams, your red dot turns to a green dot if they're available, or you can instant message, you can chat. But you're going to need schedules to know where people are physically if you want to be able to provide a greater facilitation for that in-person purposeful collaboration. Now, after clear documentation, you'll need to prepare a very clear communication and change management plan. It is critical that you anticipate the effect of your strategy on culture and operations. Preparing a 12-month communication playbook is going to put you in position to manage the change smoothly. And things to include in the playbook are a roadmap of key milestones, a plan for which communication vehicles you're going to utilize. Examples are Slack, newsletters, town halls, etc. And we even suggest sort of a mini library of pre-planned internal messaging. And this is going to help avoid being caught flat-footed in the coming months as things change sort of on the ground. Finally, with any major change, such as a new workforce strategy, you should assess, recalibrate, and ultimately evolve over time. We recommend that you review your strategy every 3 months after the initial rollout in order to ensure that there's continuous improvement and that the strategy continues to be aligned with the organization's mission. Allow your organization to experiment with new ideas that pop up along the way. Things aren't going to be static. Things should be dynamic to some degree. And to what degree depends on your leadership keeping a finger on the pulse of the organization, the direction it's headed, and how well is this really working out. And you've got to solicit feedback along the way, and then take the initiative to make the changes to ensure that you're achieving the fundamental business goals that we talked about earlier of maximizing your operational productivity, maximizing the ability to recruit and retain talent, and maximizing your financial results. So, you remember at the beginning of the webinar when we talked about the inherent bias everyone brings for either working remotely or working in the office, and that this bias can sometimes blind you to other perspectives that may be helpful. Well, we help our clients bridge the gap between differing opinions in the organization and help ensure that what could be a potentially subjective process remains an objective process. And we offer 3 tiers of consulting support in navigating your hybrid workforce roadmap. Tier 1 is focused on operationalizing a strategy that's really already mostly been decided. We review previous discovery activities, and then we use that information to align all of the departments and operationalize the strategy. Tier 2 spends more time helping our clients with that discovery process in collaboration with key leaders of the organization, and we'll conduct stakeholder interviews, focus sessions, do surveys as appropriate, and then help operationalize the strategy that they decide on. With tier 3 is next. That's the most involved level, and that's similar to tier 2, but it's just a deeper dive across more of the organization during the discovery process. And of course, we modify these tier levels collaboratively with our clients. Sample deliverables of our engagements include an executive summary, updated hybrid workforce policies, sample work agreements, contracts, employee contracts, a 12-month communication plan, sample job descriptions, a decision matrix to help teams finalize their strategy, and even sample employee letters, perhaps thanking them for participating in company surveys, etc. And there's many more. This is just a sample of some of the deliverables from the work that we are doing. So with that, let me offer a summary. The desire for freedom is changing where and when we work. And as important as a shared central office is, this desire for freedom of choice, it requires that most organizations develop a hybrid workforce strategy unique to them, their culture, and their business needs. And to get there, transition is key. How your organization transitions to the new hybrid work environment is going to determine how competitive you will be in the market to attract and retain the best talent and to compete with organizations in the marketplace financially. Third, and finally, be sequential to be successful. This is really important. Don't skip steps. Before you operationalize a strategy, be sure that your organizational structure, the infrastructure of your organization, ops, IT, finance, etc., can support the strategy. Build your plan on solid information gathered from all departments of the organization to ensure alignment and preparedness. And then follow through on all the steps for implementation. That way, you'll be in a better position to evaluate ongoing feedback and make continuous improvement. Now, there's one last thought that we want to leave you with. I see we've got 10 minutes left in the webinar, but I think we have time. And this thought is, I was in the Navy for 8 years, flying jets off of aircraft carriers. So I know that the Navy is an organization that runs on planning, training, and leadership, especially leadership. Similarly, implementing corporate programs that involve significant change requires the same 3 elements. But look, planning and training don't happen by themselves. They don't happen without leadership. This is a time that calls for leaders to determine the right workforce strategy and then to operationalize it. So be thoughtful in your planning, train your people, but most importantly, be the leader who seizes this opportunity for a new and more advantageous workforce strategy. So with that, thank you for attending the webinar. We've got our contact information up on the screen that you can see. Reach out to us at any time if you have questions, things you wanted to bounce off of us. And with that, I think we've got a few questions, and we will move into the Q&A portion of the webinar. Stand by, let me open this up. Okay, first question that I see is, who is typically included in the workshop that you offer? Well, this is an easy one. I'll take this, which is a lot of folks ask this. They want to know, as we go into this type of planning, who from our organization really ought to do, would you recommend be a part of it? And it's different with every organization, but some constants that we see and we highly recommend are, first off, human resources. That is a key component of any successful hybrid workforce strategy. Another would be IT, the CIO or someone very senior in the IT organization, because none of this remote work stuff happens without information technology supporting it. It's critical, and a lot of it we take for granted, but I'm telling you, there are ways to optimize and improve and really facilitate better communication beyond perhaps what you have done during the past 18 months. And now you have an opportunity to really go to the next level and facilitate that hybrid environment. And then it just needs to be other senior leaders from the organization that are going to help, that have influence among the majority of the personnel. And that could be someone from finance, someone from operations, marketing, etc. So is anyone else, Paul or Steve, do you have any other thoughts on that, or does that about cover it?
I think that covers it from my perspective.
You nailed it. So
okay.
Perfect.
So here's a question also. Amazon just released corporate and office strategy, or their corporate office strategy this week, and they left it to team and department leaders. And our viewer was kind enough to put in a link, which we will definitely check out. Thank you for that. And the question is, so as these major office occupiers find themselves reassessing their strategy with such regularity, what's this going to do to office real estate commitments, to headquarter expansions and location plans, et cetera? And that is that's sort of the $25 million question, or whatever the game show was. Maybe it was only $25,000 back then, but candidly, it's hard to say right now. I know that a lot of organizations are looking at their portfolio strategy and trying to use this as a an opportunity to optimize not only the amount of real estate, but also the design of the real estate. So I think this goes back to what they should be doing is be sequential to be successful. So they should really think about that workforce strategy, which drives the design of the office space, which is absolutely changing to be more oriented, not entirely, but more oriented towards common areas to meet and areas to collaborate. Although once you're at the office, you need focus areas too. But just sort of the focus of the office has changed to some degree. But that's going to ultimately drive what the footprint is going to be like. So all of us talk to a lot of companies. Many are evaluating that from a portfolio perspective, and most are either dialing down the footprint or maintaining. There's a few that are increasing, but the majority, I think, are using less space. They're becoming more efficient and more optimized because they're taking advantage of this new hybrid environment. And again, Paul, I know the real estate aspect is not necessarily right in your wheelhouse, but anything else that you have seen as we've had conversations with clients?
The one thing I would add is the second option, which you share, which is that some are keeping the same amount of space, but the key thing is that they're repurposing the space. They're making those lounge areas. They're making it more collaborative, and they're all starting this notion of hoteling and sharing of desks. And most of your work is not done at a desk; it's done in those other collaborative, productive areas.
Very good.
Jason, I want to dovetail in. That is a fantastic question, and actually was a great article. I saw it come out earlier this week. But as you're leaving this decision and involving team leaders, department heads, and managers for making the decision on who and what roles, it comes back to something that Paul focuses on frequently, which is consistency in that plan. And really the policy needs to address that consistency in the decisions being made, the equity and the balance that come with that. But as we had a discussion with a client this morning, it was not only the who and the roles and the personal aptitude, but coming back to what is the purpose for being in the office and how do we manage to that. So it was a great article, but it leverages back to what Jason stated earlier, is addressing and having that equitable policy with the consistency and the communications of that plan.
Yeah, I can tell you that to the person who asked this and the rest of our audience, what we see quite a bit of is organizations really interested in, again, the workforce conversation, but also that workplace conversation around the design of the space is getting a lot of traction with organizations. And obviously that's critical. And that ultimately is going to drive footprint. So one more question from the same person, and this both Steve and Paul can take a crack at. Share some specific insights and expectations and the incoming morale, or I guess, what's the morale going to be like once these new graduates who are just coming into the workforce, they finish their studies in a remote environment. What are some novel approaches to onboarding in this pandemic era? So, Paul, do you have any thoughts on that? Novel approaches to onboarding this folks that have spent 2 years in distance learning, and now it's a strange environment that they're coming into in the office place.
From an onboarding perspective, the components that were always important are still important, but the use of technology is key now. As we share, those people just finished their degrees in a pandemic environment where their graduation may have been via Zoom or with spread out chairs. And so the opportunity for those people to hear from the senior leadership, to hear from the board, even to understand what the mission and vision and direction is and how they fit into that, and kind of how their role aligns all the way up to the top. And so that may mean having some videos, having some live sessions, or maybe even having some collaborative sessions in the office, some kind of fireside type chats where or something like that, where people can come in and talk to the CEO, can talk to the executives, can really understand where they fit, but really making sure that you're not losing sight of those pieces, and it's not just here's your benefits and compensation, presentation. It's the full package of really understanding what the company stands for.
Yeah.
And Jason, it kind of very interesting that came up in a question, something we discussed with that same interview this morning of addressing the isolation that new hires feel when they're working from home and they're not in and making those personal interactions and personal connections, because they are craving that, but how do you address that? And oftentimes, you know, when you're onboarding a new team member, do we want to establish a peer, almost a buddy system and a peer mentor, as well as a senior leader mentor outside of the direct line of interaction that they can connect with? And also,
no, I was going to say that's good.
Yeah.
You were saying, your question was, so how do you address the isolation and the disconnectedness? And one way is through mentorship programs.
Mm-hmm. Perfect.
In the Navy, we called that a running mate.
Yep,
so you showed up at a new ship and you were assigned a running mate. Somebody had been around a little bit longer for sure, and could show you the ropes, so to speak.
Perfect.
So we're right at the top of the hour, and that's great. We got to a few of the questions. We got to all the questions that we were asked. Thank you to everyone once again for joining us. We appreciate it. If you have additional questions, please reach out to us. You will get an email from me with a very short survey. We always want to try to get better, but you'll also receive a copy of the deck and a copy of the recording. So hopefully these things will be helpful. Please share them. We do this once a month. Our next is December 8th. And if you would like a link for that, I'm pretty sure I'm going to include it in the email that I send out, but you can forward that to others in your organization if you think they would benefit from seeing this. So again, I'm Jason Jones, Paul Springer, Steve Ike with Cresa. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful day.
Thanks all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.